My contribution today is in line with the words of Mrs. Turk. PMBs seem to be working, right? And we as a company think that we do not get all the benefits that the polymers offer. This is a summary of the work of, in total, about 7 or 8 years. So I have to refer to the paper that is in the proceedings. Cannot get in too much detail here, and I also cannot speak too quickly for the interpreters who have a difficult job anyway. And the content today is with the experience with PMBs to date, but then in practice. What did we learn and what can we do? And then the basic study that we have carried out together with the Technical University of Delft to come to something which we believe is the next step in polymer modification of asphalt mixtures. We have practical results from NCAT, I will explain what it is, and the potential that this new technology offers. Some statistics. This is the growth of the use of polymers in paving. And as you can see, there is a steady growth, perhaps not so much in the last years, but this is all due to constraints in budgets and stuff like that. But the trend is upwards. Now, Mrs. Turk has shown what the improvements can be when you look at the laboratory. But there are not too many studies that have demonstrated whether PMBs really work in practice. And in that respect, I need to refer to a report that was issued by the Asphalt Institute in 2005. And they have made a tremendous effort in comparing PMA sections next to unmodified sections under the same climatic conditions and under the same traffic loading. So they were literally next to each other. One thing that you have to remember is that the average level of modification in the United States for polymer modified asphalt is about 2.5% to 3% of polymer in the binder. So that's not a lot. This is a direct comparison on rutting. Now, here is the line of equal behavior. If the dots are above that line, then the performance of the PMB is better. If they are below the line, the performance of the PMA is worse. As you can see, most of the dots are above that line of equality. They've also looked at thermal cracking. They've also looked at dot depth and fatigue. Then they made some NPV calculations, and that is the standard story. PMA works better, it is more expensive, but does it really pay off? On the basis of these evaluations, they've made some model calculations, and as you can see, the initial costs are higher, but the NPV, the net present value of the polymer modified asphalt sections, were lower in a period of 20 years than of those not modified. Now, why do we believe that we do not get the full potential? This is a curve that has been shown many times. It's about, as an example, the softening point. If you increase the SBS content, you get an S-curve relationship. At lower concentrations, there is not really an increase in softening point. And then at concentrations above 6%, 7%, the softening point also levels off. But there is a significant change in the morphology. It goes from a polymer discontinuous morphology from a bicontinuous morphology to a morphology where the polymer-rich phase is continuous. And you can imagine that it makes a huge difference whether you work in terms of cracking, for instance, here, or whether you work there. And fairly recently, we have been able to demonstrate that also in the lab. We took a PMB sample and we deliberately coarsened the dispersion. So what you see are islands of polymer-rich material in a matrix of bitumen. And it was on a flexible sub-material. And when we extended it at lower temperature, you can see the crack that is going through the matrix around the particles. There is no crack here, there's no crack there. So if a crack develops in a polymer-modified system, it goes through the bituminous matrix. So if you reverse that to a polymer-rich matrix, the cracks will be significantly less. Now, in order to do that, you also need to, if you are thinking about concentrations of 7 and 7.5% of polymer in a binder, you also need to create a polymer which allows workability at these high concentrations. So we asked the Schellenberg Institute to do some comparative testing. And on the left-hand side, you see the torque in the production of an SMA with a 6070 base bitumen plus 6% of the specially designed SBS and one with 2.5% of standard SBS. And you can see that with this special polymer, there is the possibility to work at the same or even lower torques. When we look at the fatigue, we know that fatigue resistance of polymer-modified asphalt improves with SBS modification. The line at 3% is a modest improvement. At 6%, it is more significant. But the small step going from 6 to 7.5% is quite a major one. We did a lot of work at the Technical University of Delft, including these fatigue tests, but we also worked on an analysis method called ACER, developed by Sandra Erkens. And in that method, you generate a lot of fundamental material properties. These can be used as input for finite element analysis. And that was actually carried out by Professor Tom Scarpus. And what we did was, on the basis of the data that we had generated already in the fatigue testing, was compare a structure with 25 centimeters of unmodified asphalt with 15 centimeters of highly modified asphalt. In that test, the green parts show little damage. Now, whether this is deformation or whether this is cracking. And when it gets to red, there's more cracking. As you can see in this comparison, even with this significant reduction in the thickness of the asphalt, there would be less damage. On the basis of these data, so both the fatigue testing and this ACER testing, we were willing to invest money in NCAT. This is a test track in Alabama. It is run by the University of Auburn. And they have this oval track on which there is continuously trafficking with 3, let me say, overloaded trucks. And one period of testing equals 10 million standard axle loads. What we did was we had a control and a highly modified layer. As you can see, the control was already with PMBs in the 2 top layers. The highly modified section was completely with highly modified, and it had a thinner layer. We were not allowed to go even thinner than that, because if you disrupt the system by a complete failure, then obviously they have to repair, and that gives an interruption of the total testing sequence. After one cycle of testing, there was not much difference between the two sections. However, when we started to work in a second test period of 20 million easels in total, this was after 17 million standard axle loads. The damage in cracking of the surface of the reference side, which was 20% thicker, and on the bottom you have the cracking of the highly modified side. Why do I present here the 17 million standard axle loads? Because at that point in time they had to overlay the reference section, because otherwise there would be too much damage on the reference side. This is the status of the highly modified section after 20 million standard axle loads. There were some surface cracks. They took course, and as you can see on the right-hand side, it is a crack from above, not going very deep. It is anticipated that this section can run for at least another 10 million standard axle loads. However, we will not fund it, because every time we fund this, it is about $400,000. And we believe that we have enough evidence that this works. There is even a more interesting, from my perspective, example of the potential of this material, because next to our section there was also a section from the DOT of Oklahoma, and they have been working with a section that was deliberately built on soft soil, and that had to be repaired after 10 million standard axle loads. There was a conventional rehabilitation which only lasted for 3.5 standard axle loads, and that is the picture on the right-hand side. And then it was decided to rehabilitate this with a HYMA binder layer and wiring course. And on the left-hand side, you see what the status of this material is after 15 million standard axle loads, that is after the repair that has taken place. Now, what does this mean in practice? We have demonstrated that you can build thinner layers, thinner roads. Obviously, the material that you are using, the highly modified binder, is more expensive. But at 20% reduction, that is already the break-even point. Now, we've made some model calculation using the shell pavement design method, where we used different moduli for the sub-bases and the subgrades. And as you can see, the reduction in thickness varies between 29% and 58%. That means that these improvements can be made, and then you are above the break-even point. That means that in spite of using this highly modified, more expensive binder, you can make your road and pavement so thin that it becomes less expensive than what you would do without using this highly modified system. Finally, my conclusions. This polymer that we have developed can even be used in harder bitumens. We've been working with 30, 40 pen bitumen, and it was still workable. And they can be used in existing mixes. I know everybody knows about the hard systems that are used nowadays in base courses, but then you have a special mix design. These modified binders can be used in existing and well-known mixes, so no need to modify these mixes. Binder thickness reduction between 20 and 60% are possible, And that means, and that is something that came from the United States, perpetual pavement construction is possible at normal costs, acceptable thickness, so spending less of our natural resources. I thank you for your attention, and I hope I kept a bit on time. Thank you.